building a better Bay Area. Moving forward, finding solutions. This is ABC7 News.
Hi everybody, Dion Lim here in the ABC7 News studios, and you are watching Getting Answers, live on ABC7 on Facebook as well. Now what we do is we ask experts your questions every day at 3 o'clock to get you answers in real time. A jam-packed show for you today. Today we are talking about the debate over reparations for African Americans in California. The state's first of its kind task force has decided who would be eligible to receive compensation. We're talking to a member of that group about the decision and what comes next. Also, we are honoring labor and civil rights activist Cesar Chavez. We're talking to the president of the labor union Chavez co-founded about his lasting legacy. But first, today is Transgender Day of Visibility, which celebrates the lives of trans people. It's a day to raise awareness, to address the discrimination toward this community, and also talk about their contributions. President Joe Biden tweeted the message, "To transgender Americans of all ages, I want you to know that you are so brave. You belong. I have your back." Here's a clip of the video he posted to go with it.
Our entire administration sees you for who you are, made in the image of God and deserving of dignity, respect, and support. But we know it's hard when there are those out there who don't see you and don't respect you. For example, the onslaught of anti-transgender state laws, attacking you and your families, is simply wrong.
Such a clear message that to be seen and to be heard is so important in America today. So with that, I want to bring in Pau Crago. He is the acting executive director for the Office of Transgender Initiatives for San Francisco. Pau, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, right away, what were your thoughts on Biden's remarks today? I mean, did we hear this kind of messaging addressing the trans community with the previous administration?
Definitely not with the previous administration, I can say that. But I do think it's so major to have the president of the United States addressing trans communities, basically telling us that we are valid, that we deserve respect, we deserve protections, and that really transgender equity is a priority in his administration. It's amazing.
Yeah, and we'll talk about those measures in just a second. But before we get to that, what was it like for you hearing those words coming from the president? I even got chills hearing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think especially in the context of anti-transgender legislation right now throughout the country and even throughout the world, right? We know that in a lot of countries being transgender is illegal. It's punishable by law. And so, you know, it really, as an immigrant myself to the United States, it definitely is very inspiring to have kind of the highest office of the United States really validate that trans people are who we are, that we deserve recognition, that we deserve to be seen and to be respected. So it definitely brings me chills as well, Dion.
Where did you immigrate from, by the way?
I'm originally from Spain, and I've been in the US for about 15 years, and I moved to San Francisco specifically because I knew and I felt that being trans in Spain was not going to be kind of an option in the same way that it was here. And so I really wanted to, you know, have the opportunity to be out as trans and do work for my community. So I'm really lucky and honored that I have a chance to do that with the Office of Trans Initiatives.
Yeah, I appreciate the work that you do for our community. And I did not know that about Spain and Europe. I just assumed that you see sometimes LGBTQ parades, things like that, that maybe they were as advanced with their transgender issues, but it sounds like not really.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work everywhere, right? I won't say that that there isn't work to do in San Francisco, because there is, but I also think it's one of the best places to be if you're a trans person.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that work, because President Biden touched upon these transgender measures that he wants to enact, things like mental health care, improving data, among other things. Can you give me an idea of what you would like to see happen, not only on a national scale, but also here in the Bay Area?
Yeah, I mean, I think President Biden touched on some really important points, because first of all, we know that trans communities experience really intense inequities in all aspects of life, in health, in economic development, in education, and employment, et cetera. And so kind of the first step and one of the biggest barriers for trans people has been the data doesn't always kind of reflect that, right? We know as trans people, as part of this community, that we experience all these barriers, but data doesn't always ask about trans identities and therefore doesn't reflect kind of the depth of those inequities. So I think really improving data collection is a really key piece, but also, you know, using that data for action. And I think in San Francisco, we've made some really great strides in the last few years. And historically, it's one of the places where trans history is, you know, is kind of strong and has been well and alive. And I think we really do need to do better in terms of addressing economic inequities, addressing trans people experiencing homelessness, and addressing the issues that generally affect a lot of Black, Indigenous, and other trans people of color.
Yeah, and it's that data, it's having those discussions that kind of opens the door to compassion and understanding. At least that's what I've always said for minorities. So, you know, same thing applies for the trans community. You know, speaking of the Bay Area, we are very proud because Oakland's very own Amy Schneider made an historic run on Jeopardy. She was actually at the White House today, spoke about her own concerns as a trans woman, given the anti-LGBTQ bills happening in dozens of states. Let's take a listen to what she said earlier.
They're really scary, and some of them in particular that are denying medical services to trans youth. Those are life-saving medical treatments, and they will, you know, these bills will cause the deaths of children, and that's really sad to me and it's really frightening.
I have to say, on Twitter, Amy was so excited. She and her partner had gone down to the White House, and you saw her getting ready behind the scenes. This really was historic. Pao, what are your thoughts on Amy's sentiments? Because they seem to be shared with many in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Amy is totally on point in the sense that these bills and these legislations have really dire consequences, right? I feel like to some extent the legislation that these legislations that are saying that you know, that trans youth should be protected from their supportive parents and schools are to some extent saying that they would rather have trans people not exist or even have us be dead than have us become thriving adults. Because we know that that when trans people have the support of their families and their schools and their surroundings, we build the resiliency to survive in a world that can be really harsh for us, right? So by just really stomping that from the beginning, it has really dire consequences, and we know that trans youth in particular are extremely vulnerable to mental health issues and suicidality. Exactly,
and I want to give a shout out to everybody who's watching on Facebook, because we are getting some comments and really supportive ones too. So Philip Moya, thank you. This individual says, learning over the years, breaking bread with people, siblings, transgender is another. I still love them. So thank you for all of those comments. Keep them coming throughout the rest of the newscast. Finally, I know we only have a couple minutes, Pao, but your office is hosting an event tonight to celebrate today. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, so Trans Day of Visibility is a really big day for trans communities nationally and globally. And so some of our community partners, some local trans organizations are putting together this event this evening. It'll include, you know, performances, a lot of fun, just like we like to do it in trans communities. And it really is, you know, a day for celebration for us to come together and build that resiliency in order to then go out into the world and face what sometimes can be really challenging.
That's great. We have all the information up at our screen, so hopefully everyone got to take that down. We'll put it in our Facebook link as well. Real quickly before you go, Heather Morley says this: my life growing up was rough. I came out in 2013. I've been on hormones since 2014, experienced homelessness, poverty. I'm doing well now, hoping to purchase a home in August. We need more protections for LGBTQ people. I think that's so brave for this person to come out and say that in such a public way. So I like to think that perhaps you, Pao, being here has encouraged people to speak out as well. So much appreciation to you and the work you're doing.
Thank you.
All right, coming up next, we are talking to a member of California's task force on reparations about the decisions it made this week about who would actually be eligible to receive those reparations. Stay with us. We'll be right back. We continue on Facebook Live. All right, we are in break, and this is where we switch guests, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me on Facebook.com/ABC7 News. I absolutely love hearing from people where they are tuning in from and some of these comments. Heather, I just wanted to let you know I appreciate you and Philip for chiming in. Also, Amina writing in to say, I love everyone, especially my trans, so fun. Definitely feeling the love for this community as we celebrate Transgender Day of Visibility. So if you have any comments, if you have any questions, we do have an expert in the decisions on reparations happening in California, a member of the task force. So we will be talking with this individual very shortly. So if you have questions, certainly ask them in the chat. I will try and get to as many as I can. For all of you who don't know, my name is Dion Lim. You can find me on all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I am Dion Lim TV. I would love to hear from you there as well. Let me see, I'm going to scroll through some more of this page. Travis sharing this show with one of his friends as well. Let's see. I just want to also say too that as I scroll through this, we have no room on ABC7 News on our Facebook page anywhere for hate or disparaging comments. So you will not be addressed, and I will not touch upon those. So just want to put that out there for everyone out there that we want a very supportive and communicative environment and community online. So anyway, that's what I oh, Amina saying thank you. Well, I appreciate you for commenting and spending some time with us. You know, we've spent the whole day getting this show ready, so for you to spend time with us means a lot. Oh, Douglas, how much time do we have back? Oh, 20 seconds. Okay, Douglas is our director. Our producer is Rachel. You may hear me in the commercial breaks talking to them as well. So here we go. 10 seconds. 7.5 minutes. All right, here we go. Thanks everybody for staying with us. All right, it has been a big week for California's first in the nation task force on reparations. On Tuesday, the group debated and voted on who exactly should be eligible to receive that compensation. Now, after hours and hours of discussion, the task force voted to base reparations on lineage. So joining me now to break down what all of this means is one of the members of that task force, Dr. JOVAN Scott Lewis. Doctor, thank you for being here, spending some time.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. I'd like for you to set the record straight on exactly what this outcome of the vote means. What does it mean to base reparations on lineage, and what was the other option on the table?
Sure. Happy to explain that. So I introduced a motion that passed ultimately, which was that we agreed to base the community of eligibility on those who can establish their descendancy from individuals who were enslaved in the United States or who descended from free Black people who lived in the country prior to the end of the 19th century. The other option is what we can consider a largely race-based framework, which was something that can be easily understood as whomever counts as being Black, according to the US Census. The reason why I advocated for a lineage-based model is that the state of California, while not working towards a program of reparations for slavery, and it's important that I make that clear, the task force is not advocating for reparations for slavery. That is a federal project. The issue is that the injuries of slavery, meaning the harms of slavery, were reproduced through state policies. And so the community of eligibility are African Americans, right, who would be seen as existing in the country at the time where many of these federal policies were developed and then were enacted locally at the state level. And so we wanted to determine a community of eligibility based upon lineage for that reason, meaning to recognize the historical kind of tragedies and consequences of this particular community. But it's also very important to understand that both at the federal and at the state level, it is really challenging to introduce legislation that focuses on race as the primary basis of the determination of a claim. And so these are the two reasons really why we advocated for and ultimately passed a lineage-based model.
And Doctor, I want to ask you, because this was a very close vote, 5-4. This is a topic, obviously, that has been up for discussion. It's been looming for several months. Can you talk to us about the evolution of the debate? Because there are so many people on both sides of this discussion.
Sure. So there's an idea that the motion that I introduced and that ultimately passed would effectively leave out individuals who consider themselves Black and on the basis of being Black experience in the state on a regular basis anti-Black violence or anti-Black harm at the hands of the state. We're talking about police violence. We're talking about also other forms of discrimination in areas like housing, etc. And so it was, quite reasonable to think that a lineage-based model only would in fact leave out, a significant portion of the Black residents of the state of California. However, the idea is that we have to really attend to and give recognition to the foundational injuries and the communities that face these injuries in the history of this country. And so what we're talking about is that up until the 1940s, in fact, the state of California and the country on a whole, only then began to see an increasing arrival of non-Black Black non-American immigrants to the country. And so therefore, the idea is that we have to be able to disaggregate what it means to be Black in this country, because the histories are actually really varied. And so, how we evolved was really, a very challenging, process, because what we were effectively debating was, what does it mean to be Black in the state of California? And so I think that really was at the heart of a lot of the kind of consternation and the challenge of the day.
Yeah, not to mention, it's a very complicated question to answer. And when things are complicated, people aren't always going to see eye to eye. I know there has been a lot of criticism, and this was a contentious battle. But because we only have a few minutes, I do want to ask you about this, because the issue of lineage, how on earth can someone trace their lineage? The first thing that comes to mind is, an ancestry type website. I mean, who is paying for this? It sounds like it would be quite time consuming.
I mean, if it's time consuming, I think that's a matter of opinion. I mean, we have software, we have records, we have the ability to trace these things on a personal level. This is one of the reasons why I introduced the second part of the motion, which was that someone would also have to, be able to trace their ancestry to someone, a Black person who was in the country prior to the end of the 19th century. So what we're talking about is really someone finding their great-grandparents. And so we in having this as an option, meaning to be able to trace yourself back to somebody that was enslaved might be challenging. But when we're talking about the 1890s, if we're talking about the year 1900 specifically, that actually becomes, quite easy. So as far as how do we, pay for, say a mass subscription to some kind of, genealogical service, that's something that we will have to talk about. The idea, however, is that we needed to first determine the community of eligibility, by which we're talking about who are we recognizing as the injured party. I don't think we need to go into, concerning ourselves with the kind of, minute details of how we can establish, the kind of process for determination. That would be the job, to determine those processes. However, we wanted to begin with a genuine recognition of the community that we believe to be harmed.
Doctor, one last question. We only have about a minute left. I know that June 2023 is when you have to come up with that reparations proposal. So this is the long road. People need to be patient here. Are you on track to hit that next goal?
Absolutely. So up until this month, what we've been doing is we've been effectively creating a record, an accounting of the various injuries that the state of California has been party to when it concerns the impacts and discriminations of African Americans in the state. The vote of eligibility is the first major milestone in then determining what reparations proposal will be. So the remaining life of the task force will be looking very closely at all of the issues of reparations. How are we identifying the terms of compensation? How are we thinking about apology and atonement? What are the various practices and policies around redress that we believe that this community deserves? And so we really are getting started on the actual reparations process. Yesterday's vote or this meeting's vote was simply about determining the eligible community.
I see. So the first of many further steps to come. Dr. Jovan
That's
Scott
right.
Lewis, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
Great, thanks. And coming up next, stay with us because we are honoring Cesar Chavez. We're discussing how the civil rights icon has made a lasting impact. That's all when we return. All right, we are switching guests. Thank you all for sticking with us on Facebook Live. We only had a 7-ish minute segment, so I wanted to get to as many questions. We really just scratched the surface there. Randy is asking about how it's being funded. That was actually on my list as well. Did not get a chance to answer that, but we will definitely try. Hold on one second. I'm multitasking, just so you all know. So I have these two phones, and I have sources and people that I try to respond to throughout the day. Hey, let's see. In the 3 p.m. show now, let me ping you when it's over. Hope all is well. Okay, and just a reminder to everybody, we are talking about Cesar Chavez Day here in California. If you have any questions or if you just want to learn about the American labor leader, this is the time to do so. So we are on facebook.com/ABC7 News. I'm going to try and scroll through certainly what I mentioned, by the way, with the reparations segment that we just had. There is a lot of debate, and I am seeing some comments of people, you know, saying that they are opposed to the idea of it. You know, we respect everybody's opinion as long as it is not bullying or hurtful to others, and if it's presented in a civilized way. So thank you all for chiming in. We have just about 20 seconds left. I'm going to try and drink some water. I've been talking nonstop. But once again, let us know where you are tuning in from. I'm hearing people just on their break. Some people are just being on their phones. But we'd love to hear from you. And here we go for our last segment, our last guest. Welcome back, everybody. It is Cesar Chavez Day here in California. It is a state holiday to honor the life and legacy of the civil rights and American labor leader. Now, Chavez founded the first successful farm workers union in American history. So joining us now to talk about the importance of this day is the president of the United Farm Workers of America, TERESA Romero. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
Yes. You know, this is such an important day. I would love for you to talk about Cesar Chavez's work with the UFW, its lasting impact, and also let's point out that his work actually affects all of us because the work that is done in the farms, I mean, we feel it on a daily basis.
Yes, that is true. You know, this year we're celebrating the 60th anniversary of the United Farm Workers. Cesar started the union 60 years ago. It's hard to believe. People who started the union sacrificed so much to ensure the farm workers are treated with respect and that they have the way of making a living to support their family like all of us. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, it has been very difficult. Farm workers were excluded from the Farm Work Labor Act. Therefore, it was something that we have to fight even harder to get to a point where farm workers are treated like any other workers. So we're honoring Cesar Chavez on today's date, which is the day of his passing. I'm sorry, the day of his birth. And we are here continuing the work that we started 60 years ago.
TERESA, I always say that people are compelled to do work and advocacy because there is a personal connection. Do you have a personal story as why this is a cause that you want to honor and why you want to share his story?
You know, I've never worked in the field, but I am an immigrant. I came to this country like many of the farm workers that are working in the field to put food in our table day in and day out. And I understand the struggles that they go through just by being in this country, away from their family, away from people that they love that they have not been able to see in decades. And I know how important that is. And that's why I talk to them constantly. I see them on the field. We have meetings and I hear their stories and their struggles. You know, they learn how difficult farm work is because they do it. We learn how difficult farm work is because we talk to them, we listen to them, and we understand that unfortunately things the fight continues in order for them to accomplish and to have the benefits that most other workers have.
And Teresa, I know we are short on time, but I really want to get to this question. Let's pull up a tweet from your organization to illustrate this next question, because UFW is holding events across California today to urge the governor, Governor Gavin Newsom, to sign the Agricultural Labor Relations Voting Choice Act. Can you tell me about that and why it is important? You see a tremendous amount of support out there.
Yes, we introduced a bill last year to make help farm workers vote for union representation and make it easier, make it more accessible. And we mirror it to the way that we vote in California for elected officials. That means giving options. We can do it at home, we can mail it, we can do it in person. So we have options, and right now farm workers only are able to vote for union representation in person at the premises of the employer for the most part.
I see.
And that doesn't encourage participation. So we are asking, last year, Governor Newsom vetoed our bill, and we introduced the bill again. We have now 50 co-authors, and we are making sure that the governor listens to how important this is for farm workers and that we want him to sign this bill.
That's like voting accessibility, and how when you reduce the barriers to it, it encourages more people to come out and make their voices heard. I do want to give a shout out once again to Philip. He is our super viewer today on Facebook. He says, thanks to Cesar Chavez, we now have bathrooms, we have shade, we have water. When I picked, we had neither. So it gives me chills to hear that, because the working conditions of not having those basic rights must be so tremendously hard.
We're talking about basic needs. When you are in the fields 10, 12 hours a day, and there was no access to bathrooms.
Oh, Teresa, Teresa, not to interrupt you, we want to take a commercial break, but stay with us. We're going to finish that end part of that question in just a moment.
Of course,
stay with us, everybody.
Course.
Okay, now we are in break. I'm so sorry. Sometimes I have to cut people off, but continue what you were saying.
No worries. What I was saying is that if you think about it, I mean, yes, that is true. At that time, there were no bathrooms, there was no shade, there was no rest, there was nothing to protect the workers. But when you think about it, what we passed in California to protect farm workers from heat illness were regulations that were very basic. We wanted 4 things. One was that the workers had shade, that the workers had access to clean, fresh water, that the workers are instructed on what heat illness symptoms are, because not everybody recognizes them, and that if the temperatures were 95 or above, that they would get a 10-minute break every 2 hours. If you think about it, the temperatures last year in many agricultural areas in California were over 120 degrees, and sometimes for a couple of weeks at a time. So we are trying to get legislation at the federal level to protect workers, because last year in Oregon and in Washington, we had deaths because of heat illness.
Wow. You know, it's so interesting to hear this, because I myself, full disclosure, was not that up to speed on Cesar Chavez until this segment, and learning about these basic rights, these basic needs for something that we take for granted, right? We have salad, we have our produce every day, and I don't think we think about who provides that to us, how it is made possible. So, you know, I really appreciate you sharing your insight. I feel like that 7 minutes went by so quickly. We could go on and on. So I know we have to go, but Teresa, always a pleasure speaking with you. Let's continue the conversation at another time.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate having me in.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody who has commented and really talking about. Randy also saying basic human rights and needs, yay to C. Chavez. So here we go, 10 seconds, and we are back on the air. Thank you once again. So much appreciation for all of you joining us on this interactive show, Getting Answers. We will be here every day at 3 o'clock on air and live streaming, answering your questions on facebook.com/ABC7News. I'm Dion Lim. World News Tonight with David Muir is next, and I hope you'll join us for ABC7 News later today at 4.